I would like you, please, to prepare yourselves for the high priest and priestess of the Temple of Set, directors of the Werewolf Order and Radio Werewolf, the owners of the Hell House of Hollywood, and indeed the first family of Satanism, Nicholas and Zena Schreck. Give them a hand, would you please, as they come out? Now, come on, you can give them a better hand than that. Come on, give them a better hand than that. Zena, Nicholas, you did again. Have a seat. Both of you seem rather appropriately attired in black, except for the shirt.
Little color tonight.
Little color. Man of color with us.
Right.
And you have the pentagram around your neck?
That's the pentagram of Set.
The pentagram of Set. Mm-hmm. Now, that's one of the things we're going to get into right off the bat. We're going to talk about you being high priest and high priestess.
Not high priest.
Oh, not high?
Yeah, we have
priest
to clarify.
And priestess.
Priest and priestess.
Just priest and priestess?
Yeah.
There's no high or low in Set?
There is a
high priest.
You're not there yet?
No, that's a jump. that's quite a jump. Yes.
What do you have to do to get all the way to the top?
Well, first of all, you have to understand the Temple of Set is an initiatory academy of the left-hand path. And the basic purpose of an initiatory school of Satanism, which you could call the Temple of Set, is to evolve and to develop one's soul to become closer and closer in alignment with that being we call Set, who is the Prince of Darkness.
Satan.
We'll get into that later, but Satan, in my view, is a rather corrupted and degraded name of something much older, much more noble.
So the big monkey monk in Egyptian black magic was Set.
The first Set is one of the oldest gods known to the human race. The ancient Egyptians recognized him as the Lord of Darkness, and many of his properties are certainly comparable to that figure that Judeo-Christianity knows as Satan. But as we discuss this, I think we should get into the differences as well.
Let's lay some groundwork first in terms of what you all are about. I have a little brochure here about the Hell House of Hollywood. It says on the front of this, take a scarifying tour of Hollywood's haunted house of crime, horror, and the occult. And inside here, you are described as having rare and used books that span the spectrum of horror, occultism, crime, obscure objects of art, collector's items, curios, monster mania. It seems to me that a lot of what you do is based on fear, dread, horror. Would that be fair to say?
I would say absolutely.
That would be fair to say.
Why are you so preoccupied with fear, dread, and horror,
well,
death, skulls, darkness, evil?
It's not necessarily a preoccupation with it, but rather a being in line with it. The powers of darkness, the dark side, has always been something I've been attuned to. It's not a preoccupation.
Now, you say you were born a Satanist. I mean, you
That's
feel that you are part of some generational supernatural lineage?
Well, that's difficult to say. I do feel I was born a Satanist. I don't feel that simply by being born to a Satanist necessarily makes you a Satanist. But I do feel that they are born.
So you have this natural...
And to use the word Satanist, again, I would tend to feel is somewhat limiting and maybe somewhat outdated. There are more well-defined ways of
What do you want to
putting
call
it.
yourself? A Setian? A Satanist?
We call ourselves Setians.
A follower of the Dark Prince?
Well, certainly not a follower. And I think this
You're not a follower?
This
No,
is a good...
that's where this is a good opportunity to give some facts, is that we're not followers. That would imply the difference between a right-hand path religion as opposed to a left-hand path
Now, let me interrupt you at a couple of points here, because you guys talk about things that I know about that they don't know about. You use this term a lot. Right-hand path, left-hand path.
I think
I'm on the right, you're on the left, correct?
Maybe before we even get into the meat of the matter, we should define a few terms.
What do you mean by the left-hand path?
Let me start with the right-hand path. Now,
I wish you had started with the right-hand path, unfortunately.
That's one.
That's one.
Okay, we'll get you.
We have a chalkboard here or somewhere we can keep tally. Go ahead.
For semantic purposes, we use the phrase right-hand path to define those religions or spiritual practices that attempt to submit to a greater force, a God, a universal principle that unites humanity together into
So you
this.
put me and the Buddhists and the Hindus and the Muslims and
Exactly,
everybody else all kind
exactly.
of in one category over here.
And let me clarify.
We're the
that a
right-hand
bit.
path.
The right-hand path would consist of, in religions you'd be familiar with, Islam is the most radical right-hand path system. The very word means submission. Its cousins, Judaism.
Just, but you think they're radical, you haven't met the people who listen to me, okay?
Almost every major world religion is dedicated to not separating one's soul and empowering it and individuating it, but submitting it to a God. And in your case, submitting to Jesus Christ.
But you're not
And
submitted?
we are not submitting. We are not, I'll use the common phrase that I'm sure many people in this room probably consider devil worship. We do not worship the devil. We use that archetypal figure, the devil, which we prefer to define as Set, as his specific name is Set, as a prototype, a role model, a companion.
But excuse me, but you do believe he's literal.
Yes.
You do believe he's literal.
You mean as an entity?
He is an entity.
He is an entity.
He is an entity above all entities. And don't you kind of feel, Zena, that Set was given a bum rap? I mean, let's face it, when Moses went down to Pharaoh and said, hey, you let my people go or you are in big trouble, and got his people out of there and straightened them out to worship the true and the living God, that in fact somebody must have been on a wrong mission because Set...
That historic incident or mythological incident, we can't say for sure. We won't argue the fine points. These are the historical facts we know. There was an exodus of certain foreigners in Egypt. They called themselves the Hebrews, though biblical archaeologists have seen that they may have been many groups. When they left Egypt, they were slaves, and the Pharaoh at the time was a Pharaoh who held Set to be the highest god.
Okay.
The theory is that...
No, wait a minute. You admit that Pharaoh, Ramses II or whoever he was...
We don't know for sure,
okay, but you admit that he was a devotee of Set.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And
Well,
that
now,
was,
wait a minute,
that
wait a
was
minute, wait a minute.
not hidden at the time.
But he lost. His troops got drowned. He tried to pursue them through the Red Sea.
that's
and they
where
all drowned.
that's
God
where-
conquered.
well,
the
that's
water
where-
turned to blood. Frogs were all over the place.
Right,
We
right.
won. Have you forgotten this?
Well, okay, in deference to the fact that we are in a house of worship, I will say that is the Judeo-Christian mythology of that historical event. We don't see it that way, but it's interesting. What is interesting about the so-called Exodus is that the Judaic and Christian philosophy may have really been formed there at that event. And Set was the ruling god of Egypt at that time. So therefore the Hebrews, or whoever the foreigners were who left Egypt, associated everything wicked, evil, diabolical, depraved with the major lord of the Egyptians, who was Set.
Are you saying then that in fact that's not true? It wasn't negative?
No, it was true.
It was true.
Yes, all I want to point out is
true.
this one etymological fact of the confusion of Satan and Set.
The fact that Set was in power then, that everything negative perceived with Egypt came from the ruling god Set at that time.
But Zena, he's the Lord of Darkness.
Precisely.
Darkness,
He is the one to whom you
But this is
turn
where
to perform
Satan,
black magic. I mean, you
what
understand.
we're talking about is where the term, the
Okay, I
Judeo-Christian
understand
term
all of that,
Satan
but we're
came
talking about
from.
darkness and black, and you admit you practice black magic.
Yes, I'm a black magician, of
Okay,
course.
so you have to understand that from our perspective, we're saying, well, wait a minute. this is evil, this is bad, this is wrong. Explain to me how the tables are getting turned. How do you take all this negativism and turn it into something that you want to devote your lives to follow?
The Lord of Darkness, the Prince of Darkness, the earliest manifestation of that entity or God that has shown up in so many cultures and religions, was not considered a negative force in ancient Chem or Egypt. He was the Lord of Darkness in the sense of spiritual darkness, of the night sky, of literal darkness. There was no implication of evil or moral turpitude until much later in ancient Egyptian culture, when the myth of Osiris came in, when I'm sure you're familiar with that. Judeo-Christian morality has a different conception of moral behavior and of ethics than ancient Egyptian, Roman, Greek, etc. had. So it's a question of moral relativism.
It's a question for you of moral relativism.
No, no, not completely, because if I look at the Bible, which I do whenever I'm staying in a hotel, I'll look through the Gideon Bible.
God bless those Gideons.
But there wasn't one in ours. But there wasn't one in ours here.
What?
Nope.
There wasn't one?
Nope.
We will make sure to it. Somebody in this church rustle me up a Bible before they get out of this building tonight. They're going back to the room with a Bible, okay? Make sure. All right, okay. Yes. Can I ask
Well, to bring it up to date, I think you say, well, how can you reconcile taking something that's so evil and so dark and turning around into something good? To bring it into a modern context, you have to understand that this is all relative. It's something evil and dark to you and all of you because of your particular perspective, that based on your particular religious belief system, this would be evil to you. But based on our particular religious belief system, this isn't at all evil to us.
Doing black magic?
No, it's not at all evil to us.
You do spells?
I wouldn't recommend it. I'd have to say here and now.
What?
This is to work with these forces is a very precarious thing that I would not
say that again.
That I would not recommend.
I don't recommend it either.
We would agree with you on that point. We don't proselytize. We are not trying to convert others. Black magic is probably the most dangerous undertaking a human being could work with.
Amen.
And I'm not telling these people
Nicholas,
here to experiment with it.
You're telling me black magic is dangerous.
Extremely dangerous.
Not only is it extremely dangerous, and not only would we say, obviously the people here tonight wouldn't tamper with it or play with it. I do because I am. It's a difference. I would even go so far as to say people who just dabble in it or experiment with it without fully understanding what they're getting into are really doing themselves in. It will come back to them in a very negative way.
Are you saying there are demons that could get them?
No.
You do believe in evil forces, evil entities. You do believe in evil entities.
Well, you're using
words
and
see here again,
terminology.
I don't believe in evil entities. I believe that through one's own use and abuse of such forces, that is what will do them in.
Okay, let me let me sidetrack for a minute here, because I want to make sure we have something clear too. You have something called the Werewolf Order and Radio Werewolf.
Right.
And the Werewolf Order is an organization that the two of you have founded and head up, correct?
It's really an anti-organization.
Well, it says here, it's a sorcerous circle of thought, a state of mind accessible only by an inherent rapport with the mysterious, unnameable multiplicity of forces that form the nexus of the movement.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
What that tells me is this is sorcery conjuring demons.
You would think so.
I certainly would think so, especially when right on the front of here it says the arsenal for cultural terrorism.
Yes, that's the most important.
You are a cultural terrorist.
I am.
And in your organization, you have produced some materials, including here, and you advertise this quite heavily, a Charlie Manson video.
Yes.
You met Charlie in prison, interviewed him, and you have a video you've done about him.
Yeah, and it's part of the left-hand path philosophy and development to look at corners of reality that frighten most people.
Most of us would like to put those corners in a corner very far away and keep the door locked forever.
That's true,